afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Leaders and Lunch webinar. I'm Catherine Perry, Executive Director of Leadership Winston-Salem, and I'm so glad that you're with us for this timely and important conversation on loneliness, a challenge that touches individuals across every age and stage of life. At Leadership Winston-Salem, our mission is to educate, connect, and energize leaders to serve and improve the community. We believe that meaningful connection is the heart of leadership, and that's exactly why today's discussion matters. Before we dive into the program, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank the generous sponsor who made this event possible. To do that, I'll now turn things over to my colleague, Denise Smith, and our Director of Philanthropy, who will share a few words about our sponsor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today for our Leaders in Lunch. Leadership Winston-Salem is grateful for the continued support of our sponsors who help make gatherings like this possible. It is my pleasure to introduce today's sponsor, The Resource, a trusted hiring solutions and leadership development company that was founded right here in Winston-Salem in 1979. You may remember them by their original name, Temporary Resources. However, over the years, The Resource has grown into a fast forward-thinking organization that not only connects companies with top talent, but also helps develop strong, effective leaders. Representing The Resource today is Grace McParland, their marketing director. Grace McParland is a Winston-Salem native and brings over a decade of experience as a marketing and communications professional. She has led advertising and brand awareness campaigns, created meaningful content, and implemented cultural enhancements that help build brand loyalty. Grace holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and psychology from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and is a ASA certified staffing professional. She is also a trained presenter of the Resources Core Assessment. Please join me in welcoming Grace McParland.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Denise. And yes, we at The Resource are really excited to be a sponsor of Leadership Winston-Salem, and especially of this Leaders in Lunch panel. My background is in marketing, communication, psychology, and sociology. So I am especially eager to hear from the panel and these experts. As mentioned, The Resource was founded in 1979. So we celebrated our 45th year in business last year. And as Denise mentioned, we were formerly known as Temporary Resources, so there might be some familiarity there, but we changed our name about a decade ago to better represent our full service offerings beyond just traditional temporary staffing. Our corporate office is located in Winston-Salem. We're very proud to be a part of the Winston-Salem community, and we have 5 total office locations across central North Carolina. We are women-owned, a historically underutilized business, and we're very proud to still have our day-to-day operations led by our female CEO, who herself has been with The Resource over 40 years. And while we're certainly most known for our staffing and recruiting services, our focus goes far beyond that. So we've been very privileged to work with a variety of companies across the Piedmont Triad and beyond, of all industry types, shapes, and sizes. And those partnerships have given us really unique insight into the needs of both companies and employees. So our focus really is on improving workplace dynamics and prioritizing leadership development. So in addition to making meaningful career matches, which is still a bulk of our business to this day, we also offer a full suite of customized training and development programs and services. That includes our Next Level Learning Library, as well as a new program that we have specifically created for supervisory level employees, really aimed at enhancing their leadership capabilities. We've identified that as a need across industry. The foundation of all of this is our core assessment, which I'm a trained presenter in, and the core is a tool that helps us identify the innate hardwiring of individuals with the goal of ensuring that they're in a position to thrive, both in their personal and their professional lives. Really, at the end of the day, our goal at The Resource is about maximizing potential, whether that's through recruitment and job placement, training and development, or our community involvement. So I'm especially eager to hear from today's panel on how we as leaders can better foster connection in the workplace to help those individuals thrive. We would love to help your organization maximize your people, retain your top performers. So if you're interested in learning more about our services or just taking our core assessment, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to connect with you. And again, thank you for having us today. We're excited to be a sponsor.
Thank you again, Grace, to you and the resource for your generous support and for helping us bring these important conversations to our community. Now I'm excited to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Dr. Warrenetta Mann. Dr. Mann is the Assistant Vice President for Health and Well-Being at Wake Forest University. She brings a wealth of experience and insight to the conversation, and we're so grateful to have her guide us through today's topic. Dr. Mann, thank you for being with us. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. I am going to begin by welcoming everyone and introducing our speakers or our panelists for today. Our first panelist is Lori Soper, who is the owner of Ascend Health and Life, where she is a nationally certified health and wellness life coach. Her own journey toward holistic health propelled her toward profound changes in her mindset, nutrition, and lifestyle. Our next panelist is Andy Hagler. He is the executive director of the Mental Health Association in Forsyth County, a local nonprofit, non-governmental advocacy agency where he oversees direct support programs for members of our community living with mental illness and provides training and education to help increase support for this population. Our last panelist is Alexia Mitchell, who is a licensed clinical therapist and owner and founder of Reset and Heal PLLC. She is the host of the annual Black Mental Health Summit held in Winston-Salem and a passionate mental health expert and advocate. And we are glad to have all of our expert panelists with us today. To begin our conversation, I am going to start with talking a little bit about the book. In the book that we're featuring together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometime Lonely World, our former U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, has challenged us to consider loneliness as a significant public health issue that contributes to problems like addiction, mental illness, and violence in our communities. I want to start with our panelists on your thoughts about Dr. Murthy's assertion. First, with you, Lori. How can we help people recognize loneliness in a world where we are rewarded for staying busy and being productive all the time?
Yeah, so I think that one of the ways that we can do that, I'd love to pull up actually a kind of an empowered well-being model and share my screen with you for a moment. So I'll go ahead and do that. But as a national board certified health and wellness coach, when I look at the wellness of a person, we look at lots of different dimensions of wellness. And in this model, you can see that we have, physical dimension of wellness, mental dimension of wellness, emotional dimension. And you can see kind of down there at the bottom, that social dimension of wellness. And in the book together, they talk about that, looking at, kind of our intimate relationships, also our friendships, and then the community that we create that helps us with meaning and purpose for our lives. And when we're kind of flourishing in all of these different dimensions of wellness, essentially what we're creating is like this resiliency factor, which is represented by these aqua dots in the circle here. And when the kind of inevitable stressors of life come in, these red dots around the outside of the circle, we are feeling empowered, and we can kind of ward off those stressors. What happens, and I'm going to stop sharing this model, and then I'm going to go ahead and share a model of what I call reactive distress. So in the reactive distress model, let me just get this up here. Now we're looking at a place where maybe that social dimension isn't flourishing, right? There is loneliness there. There are signs of loneliness, and those look like maybe some sadness, some hopelessness. We don't have those deep connections. We don't have deep engagement with other people. And what happens is it starts impacting, right, the other dimensions of our wellness. The CDC is really clear about the impact of loneliness on physical and mental health, increasing things like heart disease, dementia, depression, anxiety, even cognitive function. It can impact blood pressure, obesity, and even premature death. So in my practice, the way that this comes out is I really just see that getting back to the busyness, right? We're so busy in our world. It's a fast-paced world. We have full calendars. We're volunteering. We're doing extracurricular activities. We're raising families. We're taking work home. Sometimes that leaves us feeling kind of depleted and low energy. And so as a coach, I can help people to kind of regain that energy so that they can put that energy into their relationships and their community to, again, flourish in that area and become well, and have that feeling of empowerment and well-being.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Andy, is there a tipping point at which loneliness becomes or leads to clinically significant mental illness? And if so, how can we identify and address that?
Okay. Yes. Two things I think just to clarify a little bit where, when we talk about loneliness, that can be relative to the individual, who they are, how they function, and kind of like a person's nature. So it can be a little bit subjective and, of course, emotional. What happens is that when loneliness starts becoming, again, that tipping point, or where it starts becoming toxic or life threatening, is then when loneliness transitions over to what we call social isolation. So, again, just kind of a term, just really persons who have very limited or really no social interaction at all. So, in my world, for example, like persons who live with mental illness, and especially severe mental illness, tend to live very lonely lives. And in fact, one of the definitions of mental illness is the inability to engage in satisfying and fulfilling relationships. And we see this most prevalent, again, in persons, especially who live with very severe mental illness, such as severe depression, severe bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, but also individuals who may live with very severe depression. Social isolation, though, can also take on folks who may be older adults because of physical or health limitations, or like today and what's coming up for the next week with the weather, tend to be, again, in their homes, a little bit isolated. So it can kind of cover a lot of different factors. So again, it is that social isolation. I think, part of what, one of the tipping points, obviously, and again, think about the individual, who they are, what their baseline is. But again, especially when you start looking at withdrawal, and I think that is usually a very big indicator, especially for somebody who may have been outgoing, gregarious, and very social or whatever, and then that just stops or becomes severely limited. Withdrawal is usually something that is a very big key. Also, when we start looking at things like lack of self-care. So again, hygiene, personal hygiene, kind of getting on to what Lori was saying, persons, especially when they hit social isolation, may have very poor sleep habits, poor quality sleep, or again, where they have maybe poor nutrition or not very good eating habits, which again can lead to other chronic health conditions such as diabetes, what Lori had mentioned. And of course, things like being able to clean, not cook, cleaning up after yourself. Again, a lot of these may be some things that can put somebody that's in danger of themselves. Also, look at things like somebody's mood, changes in somebody's mood, and again, think about what has changed for them, what has been very different for them. And those are just a few examples of what could be some tipping points where persons who experience isolation, those with severe mental illness, those who may be older adults, may be more frail, those who may have health issues going on, or just because of today's society and from the pandemic, just tend to isolate, just don't tend to go out. Let's also not forget that kids, adolescents, and young adults are also at very high risk of social isolation. And we know that since the pandemic, and especially since 2008, with the advent of smartphones and so forth, that kids are becoming too, not only experiencing loneliness, but also experiencing that social isolation and could be possibly exacerbating the onset maybe of mental illness or other issues going on. We see this in data stemming just here in Forsyth County of the number of kids in that age bracket, 15 to 24, who are going to our local emergency rooms for suicidal ideation, anxiety, trauma, and even self-harm. So again, just a few examples of what can be some of the tipping points and what we really need to look out for and be that community. It does take a village.
Great. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate you pointing out kind of some of the identity factors that can really determine what your baseline is for loneliness or social connection, and how changes over time can really be those things that we recognize. Alexia, do you think loneliness shows up differently in marginalized communities such as people of color and LGBTQIA populations?
Absolutely. I would say thank you all for allowing me to be here today. I count it as an honor. But yes, just piggybacking off of what Andy said, the isolation piece, the social isolation, you can be surrounded amongst a lot of people, but still feel isolated, feeling like you're the only one or the only person of color, queer person, or just someone from a marginalized background. You can be around people physically, but still feel unseen. Not showing up as your true, authentic self. And then moving forward into that will prevent you from being who you are, but starting to code switch. That is a term that I like to point out often at my summit, is that that's not a place where we come to code switch, but a place that we show up to be our authentic selves. And oftentimes people will mask who they are, that are part of marginalized communities or people of color. Particularly, I've seen it show up with Black people, where if we're in a setting full of people that don't look like ourselves, we may mask ourselves so that we can fit in, because oftentimes we don't feel like we're culturally safe. And so if we show up who we really are, that may prevent us from maybe being able to network, maybe, getting the job that we want, or just feel like we're being judged. So oftentimes it show up with us feeling like we don't have a culturally safe space. And that is a hindrance to who we are. So we don't show up as our authentic self. Also, just being emotionally repressed and just silencing ourselves. That's never good, because therefore we have to keep it together, or we have to show up as this strong person that we were not meant to be. We were meant to be people who have feelings. We were meant to be people who didn't show up as robots. So when we're not seen, then we often repress who we really, really are. Right. Especially in immigrant families and people of color, that conditioning that we have grown accustomed to will silence who we are and reinforces who we are not. Okay. And we will struggle with vulnerability. So therefore we will hide behind the code switching. We will hide behind who we truly are. So that will hinder us from oftentimes maybe developing close relationships and close friendships, because we're not being our authentic selves, and we're always on guard of, is this person really who they say they are, right? So that is one thing. Also, I would like to point out social media, because Andy brought that up. That gives us a false sense of connection. And we go there because we can be who we are, but is that really who we are? Because these people are behind the screens, and that does not reflect who we truly are. So I just want to make sure that we understand that social media is a false real, a false
sense of relationships. The real relationships start when we meet people and we show up as our authentic selves, right? So that's one thing. And just not having a place to talk freely. Again, especially the LGBTQ, the LGBT, I may miss a letter, I'm sorry, but the queer community, I don't mean to do that, but not being able to freely show up without being judged, right? So that all of that leads to isolation. Nobody gets me, nobody understands who I am. So I'm just going to stay here. Whereas that's never good. And I'm going to end right there because I can go down a whole rabbit trail. So go ahead.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of support for people who are learning about code switching. Can you say a little bit more about code switching?
Yes, sure. So code switching is basically masking who you are. So can I speak from my own person? Is that okay? All right. So as you see me on camera, I am a Black female, right? And some of my I can't speak for all, but some of my personal mannerisms may come off as a stereotype Black woman, right? So if the stereotype of me is, and I'm just using this as an example, loud and boisterous, I may mute myself. I may not show up as my authentic self because I'm afraid of being judged based off the stereotype that you have in your mind or what you have known Black women to be. Or if I was a queer woman, you may have a perception of what queer people are or could be. So you mask that part of you when in actuality, you're just a fun, happy, go lucky type person. But because you're afraid of being looked at as a stereotype, you mask yourself to fit in with the norm. And the norm may not always be what's right. It's just the norm that you've created in your mind. And so I choose to show up as who I am, the person I am, and I'm not going to turn it on and turn it off to fit the norm of the classroom, of the meeting, of the networking opportunity. I'm going to show up as myself. And code switching don't allow you to be that. So you're not being authentic. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. And I mean, it can be things as simple as on this Zoom, Alexia and I are both therapists in the community. We know each other in a lot of different ways. Our lives intersect. And when I see her on the street, I might say, hey, sis, or hey, boo thing. But
Girl.
on the screen, she might say, Dr. Man, this or that. It really is having to move in and out of identities based on what we feel like is socially acceptable. And it is a lot of emotional work and labor to do that,
It's
to
exhausting.
assess your context all the time and to move in and out of those identities. So thanks for sharing that. It sounds like a lot of people in the audience, that was a new term for them and they're learning about that as well. If we go on the assumption that loneliness is a public health threat, should we treat social connection as a basic human need, right? Like food and shelter, and work toward ensuring that people are getting social connection?
I'll start off, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, yes. I mean, if you even just think about, for those of us maybe in undergrad or whatever, just in basic psychology, even with the work of Harry Harlow and kind of that work again about the attachment, bonding, and of course the work that he did, there is in all of us in some way, shape, or form, and again, it's very relative to the person and that individual, but again, how there is a part of us that is hardwired in some way, shape, or form. All of us are a little bit different. Some may be a little bit more on one end, some of us are a little bit less on the other end. You got to take into account personality and so forth. But where we are, it is like food, clothing, shelter. There is that need for all of us at some point in time to connect with others. One of the things that, and I know that there's a study or been a study or whatever at Harvard or whatever that is now really looking at that genetic component about loneliness, isolation, and again, kind of our hardwiredness to connect and be with other people. One of the things that just in my observations, and it's funny that you kind of mentioned that, Alexia, and sometimes like with the code switching, because I'm the only one here who's not licensed. So I'm not a licensed clinician. So I always feel like I got to be twice as good or work twice as hard to be half as good. Um, but one of the things that I hear a lot just with our support groups or clients or individuals that we intersect with, especially in our support groups, is that they will often say that from an early age, they never felt maybe bonded with the family. They never felt really connected with the family. And then, of course, in school, they always felt like, and again, there's some variability, but always felt like the odd person out. So again, part of their compensation or code switching would then be, the class clown or being part of an art group or trying to find some sort of group or whatever where they felt like they belong. And of course, in adolescence and particularly in adolescence and even in young adulthood, that feeling of belonging in a group that is part of one's identity, part of one's social norms, and again part of brain development. And so a lot of times they really seek to try to find a group because having that need to feel to belong is really very important. And then, of course, sometimes maybe with the onset, maybe of their bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, or whatever it was, a lot of times what happened is that it further isolated them from friends, family, or people that they just don't connect with. So they talk about maybe people that they grew up with or they went to school with or even started out in college. And then a lot of times people that they just don't see anymore. And of course, people back off and for a lot of for various and different reasons, or maybe bridges have been burned with family or whatever, again for a lot of different reasons. It gets multi-layered, multifaceted, and a little bit complex. So part of one of the values, and there's an article that I have that's called The Value of a Support Group, is again giving people, and it's not just our support groups, but there's Green Tree Peer Center and other resources, but where people can just connect. People can find that support. People can go, hey, I'm not the only one that feels this way, or I'm not the only one that just gets really angry at the world, and and it's okay to be angry at the world. And that feeling of not really being the only one. And it really isn't rocket science. It's just that part of really kind of helping people feel welcomed, that they're accepted, taking people from where they are. And again, just that feeling that they have value, that they belong. And so, yes, I mean, in a long-winded kind of way, because what can happen is that, again, and I think like what was said, that Lori said, especially when it becomes very chronic, it can lead to premature death. And kind of when we look at trauma, adverse childhood experiences, and other kind of trauma-related studies, that further isolation can lead to death, and along with very poor health outcomes and mental health outcomes.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Lori, how do community, love, and belonging create physical and mental well-being?
Yeah, so I absolutely want to answer that question, but first, if I may, I want to go back and talk a little bit about what Alexia was saying and what you kind of confirmed, which is, when you're code switching, right? When you cannot be your authentic self, that takes so much energy, right? I heard both of you say like it is exhausting to do that. And then when you don't have that energy, right? A lot of times you stop taking care of yourself, right? Everything else comes before you. You stop prioritizing your own self-care, your own mental health, and you're kind of coming from this depleted and disempowered place. And so, one of my goals as a coach is to really help people regain that energy, right? Is it through nutrition? Is it through working on sleep? Is it through moving your body, right? Is it through hydration? Is it through better self-care? Is it by fostering relationships so that they have energy to put into relationships, to fully engage, to be present, to ask questions, to actively listen, to reflect what people are saying, to affirm people and really build those deep relationships. So I wanted to just kind of comment on that first. And then the question that you asked me really about kind of this love, safety, and belonging and how that impacts physical health, I think it actually ties into what Andy was just saying. One of the things that I learned as a coach is that our, amygdala, right, that kind of primal brain, critter brain piece of us is just always seeking love, safety, and belonging. And when we don't feel that, our body is going to go into its sympathetic autonomic nervous system, right? This is that place of freeze, fight, and flight, right? Where we are, our stress response, our adrenal system on high alert, our digestion shuts down, right? Our metabolism slows down. We get really good at fat storage. I mean, this is the system that came into play when we were being chased by a lion, right? Back in the day. What we really want to do is to feel those feelings of love, safety, and belonging. And then we shift into our parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. And this is where our bodies can heal and rest and digest, right? Our immune system is kicked up, not the adrenal system. Our metabolism functions better for us, right? We're better at fat burning. And so these are some of the mechanisms, right, where loneliness then leads to the physical and mental health issues, right? That stress creates inflammation, inflammation creates disease, physical, mental, and emotional.
Great. That's a really good, I think, scientific definition, but also one that we can really relate to in terms of our immune systems and making those connections between body and mind health. Um, is it possible to feel less lonely by being social connection for others? So giving what we all want to receive, which is connection and belonging.
Sorry, I had to take myself off of mute. So, can you repeat your question? I'm sorry. Repeat
Yeah.
that for me.
Yeah, is it possible to kind of overcome one's own loneliness by extending oneself to others as being their social connection or reaching out to others to
Yeah.
be their social connection?
Yes, yes, yes. Becoming a source of connection for others can be a powerful way to ease loneliness of yourself. Only when it's done with intention and authenticity, right? That is the only way. And that just takes me back to the whole code switching thing and all of that. When anything is done with intention and authenticity, that is where connection can be met. Connection creates connection. Right. And with me, when I experienced a period of loneliness, when I probably only needed a hug, I started a whole business. But that's another story for a different day. Uh, but yeah, I just want to reiterate that being in community and helping others is a way to ease loneliness, just being out. And I love when Andy mentioned like support groups, joining support groups and things like that. Oftentimes that helps with loneliness. It helps you to realize that you're not the only one going through something. And especially when you're dealing with things like grief, or when you have lost a loved one, you feel like you're the only one that is dealing with it because life is life and for everyone. But you're like, wait, everybody just stop. Like I'm dealing with this and you all are continuing to go on with your life. And again, that just leads to more isolation. But making sure that as you are tending to others and being out in community and creating a source of connection with others, that you are taking care of yourself, right? That you're not abandoning your own stuff and your own self, because that can also lead to emotional exhaustion. right? So just making sure that you are taking care of yourself by getting a culturally affirming therapist, one that respect you for who you are, and that they embrace all of the differences that you bring, right? But making sure that you are taking care of yourself through whatever self-care. And I like when Lori said, rest. Rest is always number one. I don't think we honor rest enough. A good nap does a body good, and I think sometimes we forget that. So yes, becoming a source of connection for others can be a powerful way to ease loneliness, but just making sure that you are putting yourself at the forefront first by taking care of you, and then tending to others in whatever way that may look like. Like I said, a support group is always an awesome thing to make you feel seen, to know that you're not in this by yourself, and that there are others that are also experiencing some hiccups in life along like you are. Yeah.
Great. Karina put a great question in the chat that I want our panelists to respond to. Each one of us can do that individually. She says the book emphasizes the importance of dedicating time to nurture relationships. What practices have you all found effective in maintaining meaningful connections with others? And I think one of the things that's really important is what Alexia just said about being intentional, about being thoughtful about what are the relationships that I value, and where do I plug those things into my life the same way I do rest and food and work and all those other things that are kind of those have-tos. And so one of the things for me has been, I have to give a plug to Leadership Winston-Salem, and the coffee chats that we have, that is a great place that I try to put it on my work schedule. It's once a month to go out and connect with those people because they're important to me. And it gives me a dedicated time that I know I'm going to see some faces that are going to make me smile and have some conversations. I might also make some work connections, but that's just a time for me to connect with people. How do you all build in intentional time to nurture relationships?
Yeah, and I'd love to tackle that. I think as a coach, when we look about moving someone from a place where they're like dissatisfied with one of their wellness dimensions, or they're not flourishing in that area, there's really two ways that as a coach we try and shift people back. The first would be like these positive support systems that Andy, Alexia, and Warnetta you're speaking about, right? Sometimes that can just be it could be a health and wellness coach, right? Some place where there's a quality relationship in your life where you're really being heard, you can be authentic, right? As Alexia pointed out, people are intently listening with a goal of like getting on your unique map of the world and your experiences and how you view the world. A mental health provider can do that. A social worker can do that. Even sometimes like a massage therapist, right? It's kind of an intimate relationship with a therapist or someone even who's working on your hair, right? Just to kind of have that more in-depth conversation and authentic conversation. The second one is kind of what Warnetta, you were just talking about, like really making intentional time, right? Maybe creating like a daily or a weekly or a monthly routine that includes social self-care activities. I mean, it might be the coffee club. It might be creating a self-help book club. It might be thinking back to when you were a kid and something that you love to do, like riding a bike. And so you reach out to people in the neighborhood and see if they want to go for a bike ride, right? So any like clubs where there are common interests. I mean, I think Dr. Murthy in the book talked about a daily reach out for 15 minutes, being really present in your relationships when you're engaging with people, finding those times for intentional solitude, right? Alexia, to rest and recover and refresh. And then just doing kind of small acts of kindness or service. I don't know if anyone on the call has read Mel Robbins' The Let Them Theory. But one of the things that she talks about is when we get overwhelmed by like the state of the world, and some of the distrust and divisiveness that can have us withdraw a little bit, that one of the best things we can do, like instead of allowing that mountain of stuff to overwhelm us, is just like look down at your feet and take one small step. And that might be finding the one thing you're most passionate about and taking action in that area. Maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's reaching out to someone who you see is lonely, but just doing that one small thing. And I think that really helps us to make those deeper connections.
I'll just share a little bit about me, and some of this may get a little, little on the personal, because we're all human, and just because we're in the mental health field or the helping field or whatever, well, to be very honest, we're the world's worst. And we have a hard time sometimes practicing what we preach. But we're also human beings too. And I think it's also just learning to to take time to take care of yourself, engage in meaningful connections. And then learning to say no or to give up things without feeling guilty. Just kind of in my bio or whatever, a little bit about some of the trainings that we do. Last week, I had a very intensive, it's always very intensive 5-day training that I do. Had planned to do something on Saturday. I woke up Saturday morning and I'm like, no, no, I just can't. And two things. Number one was to spend some time with my spouse and with my family. My spouse lives with MS, and I have a sister who is living with ovarian cancer. So I have really had to learn, and then trying to balance a full-time job and trying to keep everything all together. And so I have really had to learn and force myself to just know what I can do, stop what I can do, learn to say no, not feel guilty about it. And so Saturday was just spent hanging out at home, watching some movies, eating food, and just being. And it wasn't like there was great conversation or anything going on or anything profound, but just being with my family and being there, and them allowing me to watch the movies that I like to watch, that just kind of relax me and help me or whatever, because it's like I just really needed that day. And it really ended up being just a great little day. And then sometimes little small talks and conversations that I thought were very meaningful. And then one of the things like yesterday, and you talk about intent, like last night after here, and I had a group meeting, and then I was going to go over to my sister's and get the garbage and all that out on the curb and everything. Then was planning to go to the grocery store, pick up some food, do this, whatever. So all in a day's work. And I just sat down because just because it was more important to take an hour or so and just sit down and really just have a conversation with my sister. It was more important. I mean, I got the garbage out on the curb and I got her mail and everything like that, but I forego, just didn't go to the grocery store, but really just to sit down and talk, because just kind of in her journey and what she's going through right now after surgery and chemo and still more chemo and things like that. So it is really that intent, and just to sit down, take the time, not focus so much on being task oriented, but to really talk and not look at the phone and not look at the social media, but just to really have some conversation. So I have really learned, just to really talk and connect. And so, like when people come here at the office, it's just little gestures like making sure that they have a bottle of water, or are these some things that they need. It's made me more in tune, and like this one individual just offered a bottle of water, and you would have thought that I'd given them, a pound of gold. So it is sometimes little acts. It is intentional, but just sometimes ways just to connect and have some little conversation and kind of where people are and kind of what they're going through in life. That's just a little bit about me, my story, kind of my journey, and I think how we all as human beings learn, grow, and develop.
Good, thank you. Alexia, I know you are a mom who has younger children. And so I want to hear how you're intentional about your social connection in your life when you have so many demands on you. And then we're going to talk a little bit about social media too and how that plays into loneliness and disconnection.
Yeah, so real quick, one thing that helps me and what was pointed out was the meaningful part. And when with 3 kids and I'm a caregiver and all the other things, I have to be self-aware of my boundaries. Boundaries, and that, Andy, that was screaming when you were saying it's just boundaries. And I've learned that when I set boundaries, I'm able to show up with intention. I'm able to tell people, no, I can't go. My social calendar can get really full, and I have to, and Dr. Mann, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It can get really full. So I have to be intentional with saying, no, I can't go here. Okay, yes, I can do that. So I have to be self-aware. And then also with the meaningful connections is that I've learned my vulnerability is what people are attracted to when it comes to being in my circle, right? So I've learned that when people, um, I give people permission to drop their mask when I'm able to drop mine, right? When I take my mask off, that gives people permission to do that. So that creates meaningful connections because I am an open book. I will tell you from here to there. Okay, don't get me started. Andy, he already just started, but I will share, but I'm also a good listener, right? So I'm a good listener and I show up with intention and I'm consistent. So I'm not your meaningful connection today, and then tomorrow you can't reach me, right? So I'm very open, and with my boundaries, I'll say, no, I can't do that, or I don't have the capacity. I wish I could, but I can't, right? And oftentimes when it is a meaningful friendship and connection, people understand. They don't challenge you. Well, why not? Well, can you, well, can we? And can't, no is no. So I've learned that with being a mom and having demanding responsibilities, that my boundaries is what keeps those connections together. Because once I start moving out my boundaries, there I am holding back opportunities from my family. And now I'm stressed. And now I'm not taking care of myself. And I can't get the nap that I want, because I am pulled here, there, and everywhere. So just making sure, again, putting me first. And when I put me first, that leaves my cup full. So therefore I can pour out in other areas that are needed.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. When we think about loneliness and being present, which is really what we are all talking about with social connection, how does young people's attachment to digital spaces, social media, group chats, virtual therapy, impact their social connection or deepen isolation? How do you think social media or other digital spaces play into that?
I'll be quick and I'll start off and then I'll let everybody else chime in. But I think kind of getting back to what Alexia was saying is that it is that false sense of connection, number one. Number two, and again, this is not, social media has its place and it's here, but we have to remember that smartphones, social media were originally intended for adults. They weren't really originally intended for kids. And again, thinking about brain development and the prefrontal cortex, your executive functionings, part of, I think, with loneliness and some of the things going on with adults as well as kids, because we all do things on social media that we shouldn't do, from time to time, or we wax and wane. But kids, again, part of brain development, just they don't have maybe the capacity to put on the brakes or, get this to stop. So, so in some ways with kids, and depending where they are in their development, would be the equivalent of giving a 5-year-old a set of car keys. Here, go out and drive this car a little bit, because again, that lack of control, it's always there. It's 24/7. And again, just kind of like boundaries, but also just kind of knowing when to stop. And I think part of us in again, being role models and all, is for us to also know when to stop when using social media, because I think that's part of what's made loneliness a little different, because we depend too much on that. And maybe for a lot of us, we don't have the family system, the family structure, some things that maybe our grandparents or great grandparents used to have, that have been kind of lost, or just are not there. And I'll let everybody else chime in.
Yeah, I'd love to chime in for a minute. But I think one thing that's important for us all to recognize is that even things like the news, right, and social media, I mean, they are designed, right, to manipulate our brains and the way they work, and to keep us connected to them, to keep us scrolling, to keep going down the rabbit holes, right? And so one of the things I encourage clients to do is just, again, to kind of think back, like what are other ways you could get the news that aren't going to kind of hijack your brain like that? Or what are some other things you could do, like maybe reading or listening to music or appreciating art, or something like that, that can kind of entertain you, but not allow your brain to be manipulated this way. I think technology breaks are really smart for everyone to kind of put in their life. And then I would also say kind of this doing a purging every now and then. Like I'm on Instagram as a health coach. My practice is on there. I provide lovely, healthy content and inspirational tips for people all the time. So, if someone's receiving that through social media, right, that's good content. There's really great, healthy content out there. And just kind of sticking with that. Be mindful of who you're following. But it needs to be intentional. Like, Alexia, you've used that word a lot today, and I think it's really important, right? We need to be intentional in what we're taking in.
And I would just echo everything you all have said. A lot of my clients are teenagers, and that is usually like about 85% of our session is around social media. They're showing me their TikToks, they're showing me their TikToks, and they're making TikToks with, not with me in their TikToks, but they're doing them while we're in session sometimes. And I allow that because that is connection with them. So I think, we always harp on the harmfulness of social media, but there is a level of connection with it as well. And I have connected with a lot of my teenage clients through social media, but also highlighting and continuing to highlight to them the importance of connecting with their families, giving them homework to make sure that, hey, are you coming out of your room? Are you eating dinner? Are you not engaging in chats? Because what I've learned, I'm late to the party, is that these games that they play have chat rooms behind them. So while parents are just checking the chat icon, there are games that they're playing that have chats in them. So just educating my clients' parents as well of the burden of social media, and that it's just not in your face with Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat, but there are things behind the scenes that we're not aware of. But making sure that they are doing things to make them, again, intentional with being amongst their family, engaging in activities outside of the home, finding out what it is that they like to do outside of social media, and asking them. I know today when my client was showing me her TikTok before this session, just what are you attempting to get out of this? You know, well, I want people to like it. I want to like it. Or when it comes to our boyfriends, I want them to show that I'm their girlfriend, you know, and it's like getting them to the reality because they are so kind of stuck in this not real world. And so giving them the realness, but making it on their level where they can understand. So social media is bad, 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 bad. But like you said, Lori, that's where we all get our news from these days. Right. And the algorithm will show you what you give your attention to. So a lot of this is education for them and not just saying it's a bad thing for who and how. And that's what they want to know. So that's what
Well, this has been a wonderfully rich and meaningful conversation about loneliness, social connection, isolation, and that tipping point over into mental illness and how we bring ourselves back to health, wellness, and wholeness as human beings who require social connection. And it really is a basic human need that we have to connect with others. I'm wondering if there are any last questions in the chat or things that our panelists might want to say before we transition back to the staff who's going to talk to us a little bit about the book. Well, seeing no questions or anything in the chat, I'm going to transition back to our Leadership Winston-Salem staff, who is going to talk to us a little bit about how you might get the book.
All right. Well, thank you all. First off, thank you, all of you, for being here today. Dr. Mann, Lori, Andy, and Alexia, we appreciate your participation and being here with us and sharing in this conversation. At this time, I wanted to, as on behalf of Leadership Winston-Salem, highlight we are a part of the summer book read, which is being sponsored through Bookmarks, a local nonprofit bookstore. I hope you all are familiar with it. I will drop those the link to their website and also the Book with Purpose website in the chat. We are a site to pick up your copy of the book by Heather McGee, The Sum of Us. It is right here at our location at 624 West 6th Street. So you are welcome to come in and pick up your copy. This is an extension of all of our programming surrounding connection and being in community with each other. We are tagging this month and all other events that we do this summer as Connection Changes Community. And that is our goal with the purpose of this webinar and also being a part of the Bookmarks Summer Book with Purpose program. So at this time, I'm going to put those links in the chat. And I'm going to invite back our Executive Director, Ms. Catherine Perry, to tell you, to bid you farewell and tell you a little bit more about Leadership Winston-Salem.
Thank you, Frida. As we wrap up today's Leaders in Lunch webinar, I want to again thank our incredible guests, Lori Soper, Andy Hagler, Alexia Mitchell, for sharing their wisdom and perspectives, and to Warnetta Mann for moderating such a thoughtful and meaningful discussion. To our attendees, thank you for spending part of your day with us and engaging in this important conversation. We hope that it sparked reflection, connection, and perhaps even a step in your own leadership journey. We're also deeply grateful to our sponsor, The Resource, for their generous support, which makes events like this possible. In addition to educational webinars like this one, Leadership Winston-Salem offers 2 core programs designed to connect and inspire leaders, our flagship program and our Insight program. Right now, we're accepting applications for the flagship class of 2026, and the deadline is this Friday. If you or someone you know is ready to grow, connect, and make a difference in Winston-Salem, we encourage you to visit our website and learn more. Thank you again for being with us today. Stay well, stay connected, and we hope to see you again soon.